Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 477, and today's date is September 26, 2014, and the title of this episode is Iraq Reveals Troops and Equipment Start Arriving to Speicher Base in Iraq in a Few Days. Before I get started, I just want to welcome those new subscribers on YouTube and those people who have been listening to me for quite a while. If you haven't gone over to The People, and you can go right to the x22report.com site, visit the site. There's a link on top that says The People. This is a forum where like-minded people are getting together, talking about what's going on. And you can read everything on there. It is completely free. If you like to join, you can. All you need to do is submit an email address, and it could be any email address, as long as you can confirm it. So you can open up a new account if you don't want to give your original address. I know people are hesitant to do these type of things, and I get it. And you can pretty much create a username that you want to use, what you want to be called by, and you can upload a picture of something that represents you or your username, and you can use that on the forum, and you can talk to other people, you get to know other people, and it seems like this is now building. More people are coming on to The People, and there's a lot of conversations going on about what's going on in the entire world. And those people who from other countries, come on over. If you don't see your country listed, let me know, and we will place the country on the forum. This way you can give us updates in your country of what is going on, and also you can post to other places. Let's get into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand here in the States and also in Australia that the housing markets are starting to slow. And we're starting to see this in many other areas. We're also seeing it in England and Wales, where all of a sudden the asking prices for houses in England and Wales flatlined in September for the first time in 19 months. The survey is the latest sign that Britain's housing market has cooled down. Now, we're starting to see this in many different locations, and we started to see this during 2007, 2008, when the housing market here in the United States started to cool, and we're seeing the housing market definitely cool here in the States. And this gives us some type of sign, an indicator that the money that's been pumping into these markets is starting to leave, because we know the people inside these countries, most of them, some of them are okay, some of them aren't, but a lot of them, the people do not have the funds, they don't have the credit to get mortgages, and right now they're just not in a position to purchase homes, especially here in the United States. What we've noticed going back to August of 2013 during that last false flag event where they tried to get into Syria, what happened was, during that time period when they were telling everyone that the housing market was in a recovery, Citibank, Wells Fargo, Chase, they were all laying off thousands and thousands of people in their mortgage department. Now, if we're in a housing recovery, you don't lay off thousands of people in your mortgage department because you expect people to take out mortgages. And this went throughout 2013 leading into 2014. It's still going on. There are still mortgage companies that are completely closing. And what we're seeing is that mortgage applications during this whole time have continually declined each week. Sometimes it's a little bump up, but overall, we're about 70% down, a 70% decline in mortgage applications. And this shows you that the people are not buying these homes. It's the hedge funds, investment companies, foreigners who are paying in cash. But guess what? They realize the prices have leveled off. Now they're starting to slide down. They're getting out of the market. And we're seeing this not just here in the U.S. We're seeing it in Australia. We're seeing it in England. And there are signs in Canada right now where it's happening there. Now, we see that consumer confidence, the UMich consumer confidence, holds near 7-year highs. So right now, the people are feeling very confident, which is absolutely meaningless. It means absolutely nothing because, listen, everyone was very confident when they were working for Lehman right before everyone was walking out of the door with their boxes. So confidence just means you feel good that the government and the central bankers have convinced you that everything is fine. It really has no bearing on what is really going on here. Now, it looks like the second quarter GDP was up to 4.6%. Of course, we know the first quarter was down negative 2.1%, so it surged, pretty darn high, and it just blew everything out of the water, which is completely fake, false, and phony. It was completely manipulated. And we can see as we move into the third quarter, we're seeing that things aren't going to be that great, but don't worry, the government's going to step in, the central bankers are going to step in, and they're going to try to manipulate the data as best they possibly can, just like they do with the unemployment. And when we start to look around, we're starting to see that everything is manipulated. There's a report out there now that 1 in 4 Americans 25 to 54 are not working. Senate Budget Committee shows a startling fact. Almost 1 in 4 Americans between those ages of 25 and 54 are just not working. There are 124.5 million Americans in their prime working years, ages 25 to 54. Nearly 1/4 of this group, 28.9 million people, or 23.2% of the total, is not currently employed. And they're saying that most of these people were looking for jobs. They got, really upset about what was going on, and they decided just to drop out of the labor market. Well, I hate when they say this because, they got disgruntled. They got, they make up all these different things. What happened was the labor market left them. They continually put out resumes, and they didn't get called back. They didn't get any answers, so they sent out more resumes. Nothing. They switched them up. Maybe I'm asking, or I have too much on my resume. Maybe my salary is too high. Let me bring this down a notch and see if I can get a lower position. Anything I could possibly do. So they sent them out once again. Nothing. That doesn't mean that you left the labor market. That means the labor market left the people. That means there are no jobs for the people, and this is why they've fallen off. Again, we have to look at how they count everything. If you haven't been on an interview in 4 weeks, they consider you don't want a job. You don't want to support your family. You don't want to bring in an income. You don't want to eat. You don't want to pay for your car. You don't want to pay for your house. It is absolutely ridiculous. And we can see that this number is pretty darn close to the truth here. It's probably a little bit higher because when we look at the retail market, we see the amount of stores closing. We see the amount of people being laid off in retail. We see how the housing market really is. We can see that this is all completely fake, phony, and false. And we are in no way in any type of recovery whatsoever. And this is why these central bankers have been pushing for war so hard. This is why we're in the Middle East trying to gin up war again, because Libya has fallen, Yemen has fallen, Lebanon is on its way, Iraq is in chaos, Syria is being bombed right now. The whole thing is one big, complete mess, and this is being done completely on purpose to cover up this economic collapse and to bring us to war. Now, when I say, of course, cover it up, doesn't mean it's going to stop it. It's just going to mean they're going to blame it on someone else. We're going to go through the collapse. We're going to go through the devaluation of the dollar where you try to go out and purchase something and it's so expensive you can't afford it. We are going to go through people who are not understanding what is going on, and they're going to run to the supermarket to get whatever they possibly can because their money is worth absolutely nothing. If those people, I don't know how many people who are listening can remember back in the 70s, and I do remember this when the gas shortage, when they told you we're running out of oil. And this was only because we came off the gold standard and they were trying to hook up the deals in the Middle East to put the dollar on the oil reserves. And what happened was gas stations had lines down the block. And then they had to make up days with green and red flags or the even and odd numbers of your license plates to go and get fuel. And people didn't drive around that much because they were very nervous because they didn't know when they can fill up again with gas. Because if you missed that day where you had to go, you couldn't get it until a day later. And we're going to see the same thing occur now, but it's going to be much, much worse. We have so much debt in this country. The dollar is on its last legs, and we are headed towards war. And we can see that they're doing everything they possibly can to cover up what is coming. We also see that public pension funds face a $2 trillion shortfall, and this is coming from Moody's, and this is what they're warning. Despite the robust investment returns since 2004, annual growth in unfunded pension liabilities has outstripped these returns. Moody warns in its latest report on the state of public pension systems, the top 25 fund accounts for 40% of the entire U.S. public pension system, with Illinois, Kentucky, Connecticut, and Louisiana at the top of the most underfunded list. Now, you have to remember, a lot of these pension funds were taking those subprime securities because they were safe to be used in the pension funds, and they completely lost their value during the crash in 2008, and we're seeing this really take effect right now. And this is going to be a huge, huge problem once the system starts to collapse and fall apart. Okay, now we always talk about how the government officials, not just here in the U.S. and the UK, Australia, and we can see they're implementing a lot of these draconian laws where they're trying to take away the rights of the people, and they're trying to point out who's a domestic terrorist and who's not. But something very interesting that David Cameron said, that he told the UN, that nonviolent extremism is just as dangerous as terrorism and must be eradicated using all means at the government's disposal. He said in references to 9/11 and the 7/7 bombing, truthers could be used as one example of the type of extremism that must be dealt in a similar fashion to the Islamic State. So those people who are looking to get to the truth of what really happened with these false flag events, these people are extremists, are domestic terrorists, are the ones that we need to go after. So you could see what they're doing here. And it's not just here in the United States. I see it all over the place. This is why Europe has their own private police force where they can be dispatched to any country that they need. And also we see London purchasing water cannons, Spain purchasing riot gear. They're getting prepared for this. Lately we saw the White House where this guy jumped over the fence, made it through all the sensors to the front door with snipers and 1,200 Secret Service men, and now they put a buffer zone with a fence. So you can see what they're doing here. They're very nervous about the people in these countries. They're nervous that they're going to figure out what has been going on because of the internet and everyone talking to each other now, and that they're going to say, wait a minute, all this was ginned up to bring us to war, to save you, to keep you in power because of paper and ink, because of using the currency, because of the central bankers. And you can see they're building this up over time, and they're continually trying to point out who is a terrorist and who they need to go after, because they're very, very nervous about the population of people rising up and saying enough is enough is enough, you need to go. And you can see this is really, really building. Now, something very interesting here. The U.S. Forest Service has proposed a set of rules that would strictly limit filming and photography in federal wilderness areas by media companies, commercial outfitters, nonprofit groups, and even potentially members of the general public. The proposed rules would require newspapers, photographers, television producers, or filmmakers to obtain a special permit before entering a wilderness area. This special permit is going to cost you $1,500. And if you do not abide by the rules, you can be fined up to $1,000. And of course, this is raising some First Amendment concerns where we can't go into public parks and take pictures and film the wildlife. These parks belong to the American people. Why are they taking it away? Well, maybe they're being used for collateral to other countries and they don't want people in this area. Maybe they're trying to raise revenue because the system is imploding on itself, so they need more revenue. And we can see this is a huge, huge concern, because I don't want to go pay if I want to go film in the wilderness in the people's national parks. That is absolutely ridiculous. And what they're saying is that far more troubling to some is the prospect of journalists being denied access to the wilderness area because a government agency didn't approve a story idea. So the government wants to approve any type of news story or anything where you're looking to get permission to go inside of the wilderness area. And also, just because you pay for a permit, it doesn't mean it's going to be approved. They can also deny permits. And the privacy right groups are saying, you know, what gives the government to determine what is news and what is not news, what you need to do in there, what you not need to do in there, and this is completely a violation of the First Amendment here. So we can see right now what is going on here. They're blocking off areas of the country where they don't want the people to go, and they're definitely trying to take away as many rights as they possibly can before this thing comes crumbling down. Now it looks like the illegals are going to be let into the armed forces. And it seems like the program is being ramped up. And as we know, the borders are wide open. And we've said this many, many times before. The agenda of the Obama administration is to have these illegals come over, to give them working papers, to have them go on to Obamacare. The government will subsidize them. It will boost the Obamacare numbers. And of course, as they said on the news, that a lot of these people coming over the border are children. They're really not children. They're teenagers, and teenagers between the ages of 16 and 19. Of course, this is the perfect age where they could be drafted into the armed forces. And the Pentagon is to start a recruiting undocumented immigrants who came into the U.S. as minors and possess valuable skills that they're looking for. The program offering the opportunity is capped at 1,500 recruits per year, but could be ramped up as time goes on. The new policy revealed by the Department of Defense on Thursday expands the existing pilot program called Military Accessions Vital to National Interest. The expansion of the program to illegal residents adds between 1.2 million and 2.1 million children, teenagers, and young adults to the potential talent pool for this upcoming World War III. And you can see exactly what they're doing here. And you also have to remember that Charles Rangel still has his bill floating around Congress to reinstate the draft. And this is not going to be just the draft for men. It will be the draft for women, because they understand what is coming. And this is why this is all being done at this point, because they realize eventually when World War III kicks off and we have the big bang or the big explosion or the big event to let us all know that we are in World War III, you're going to see that draft bill all of a sudden appear and get voted on. You're going to see this program ramped up to bring more illegals into the armed forces, and this is going to really get out of control, and people are going to be, what is going on here? And it's going to be a huge, huge surprise to many, many of the people who are not really paying attention at this point. Now, just like we thought, most of the illegals that are coming over the border, they're not even going to their hearings. Right now there's a new report saying that 70% of the illegals haven't even showed up to any of the hearings whatsoever. And many of the hearings are pushed out, 5, 10, 15 years. So this whole thing was completely set up, ready to go, and we can see the agenda that they're pushing here, and we understand why they're doing this at this point, because right now, working permits, put them on Obamacare, get them ready for war. This is exactly what is going on. Now, the FBI director lashes out at Apple and Google because what they've done is they have encrypted these smartphones. Now, like I said in the past, the NSA, the fusion centers, they cannot get into encryption that they don't know about. If they don't have the method or the key or anything like that, they can't really break it down. Even though everyone thinks they can, they cannot. The only reason they can get into Microsoft, into Yahoo, into Google, into iPhone is because they pay them to give them a backdoor. The same thing with laptops and computer systems. There are backdoors in the chips of Intel. So we can see right now that the FBI is kind of pissed off at this point because what has happened is since the release of iOS 8 for Apple and soon for Google, they've put an encryption on the phones that the NSA, FBI, fusion centers know nothing about, and they cannot break into it. They can't even ask the companies to break into the phones because they will not be able to do it because it's encrypted and they don't have a back door. And right now, FBI Director James Comey attacked recent reports regarding both Apple and Google's efforts to provide customers of their respective operating systems with the ability to secure data with encryption unlike anything previously available for mainstream mobile devices. Apple claims that even its own Palo Alto, California engineers can't crack into the locked phones running the iOS 8 platform released this month, and Google says its new Android devices will offer data encryption by default. Comey outright complained about the company's announcements and insisted that their efforts will severely hinder law enforcement operations. Upon release of the company's latest operating system last week, Apple said the personal data such as photos, messages, including attachments, email contacts, call history, iTunes, contents, notes, and reminders is placed under the protection of your passcode. And Apple cannot bypass it whatsoever, so there is no reason whatsoever for the government to go to Apple to ask to break into a phone. And of course, the FBI is really angry about this. They're saying we would like just to go right into anyone's phone that we want and look at their information. Again, this is a violation of the Fourth Amendment where they are not allowed to go into any of your personal things unless they have a warrant. And he's complaining that this is going to hinder their investigations. They're not going to be able to look at anything. Well, let me ask you, if you put all your personal information in a safe in your house and it's behind the locked door and you have the combination and they try to go to the locksmith the company who made the safe, they're not going to be able to get into the safe. So how do they get into the safe? They have to get a warrant, and the warrant allows them to break into the safe. So for the iPhone and for anything else, if they really have a case going on here, they are going to have to get a warrant, and they're going to have to break into the phone somehow. They can't go back to the companies. They'll have to do it on their own. Okay. Now, out in Sierra Leone, it looks like they're going to implement another quarantine. It's going to quarantine about 1 million people ahead of the UN Ebola talks, and they're doing this to maintain control of what is going on. And a lot of people saying this is martial law, but when you have an outbreak like this, you need to pretty much, I'm not saying bring them to camps and things like that, but you're gonna have to take areas and have them where people can't go in and out so you can contain the disease in that area. And this is exactly what they're trying to do, because otherwise this will spread more so to other regions. And again, just like if you have any type of sickness here that they don't want spread around in the hospital, they quarantine you in a room and nobody's allowed in and out without a type of hazmat suit. And the same thing's happening in Sierra Leone. The same thing's also happening in Liberia. The economy there is completely falling apart. The government is falling apart. And Ebola is continually spreading. But in some countries, they have it under control, and it seems like it's not as bad as Liberia and Sierra Leone right now. Now, Russia is going to send doctors to Sierra Leone to fight Ebola. They're sending more doctors to this region. Cuba is also sending more medical help, and they're trying to help the situation in these countries. The World Bank right now is going to inject $400 million to boost the Ebola fight in West Africa, which then will now put these countries on the hook to the central bankers, where they will owe money later on. And you can see how this is all working out here. Now, we understand that China is bringing in more troops into the South Sudan region. And of course, we have China on one side where they're protecting their investments. We have the United States on the other side, and there's fighting going on in the middle. And the U.S. came out today saying that they're going to expand their sanctions on South Sudan. The United States, frustrated with slow progress in South Sudan's peace process, and is ready to expand sanctions against political and military figures in this area. And this reminds me of what was happening in Ukraine. They were very upset that they weren't laying down their arms, the southeastern people, and they pretty much put more sanctions on Russia. It seems like the same thing's happening here in South Sudan. You're not listening to us. You're not laying down your arms. You're not giving up, so we're going to sanction you further until you do. It's a bully tactic. Now, Nigeria is out there, and I said this yesterday, where they found an imposter posing as the Boko Haram leader, and then there was about 219 Boko Haram followers that surrendered, and they are out there right now, and I believe this might be directed to the CIA, United States government, central bankers. They're saying, and this is coming from the military, has warned it will kill anyone who dares use the name Abubakar Shaku to rekindle support for the group. Whoever, if there's anyone out there that's impersonating the dead Boko Haram leader, they will kill them on the spot. So we can see this whole Boko Haram fake terrorism ginned up thing to get U.S. troops into the country is completely falling apart at this point. Now it looks like in Ukraine, the Ukrainian government is kind of folding right now because it seems that they will pay Gazprom $2 billion for the gas it has received from Russia by the end of October, an additional $1.1 billion by year's end. The amount that Ukraine is expected to pay Russia is short of the $5.3 billion that Kiev currently owes to Gazprom. Gazprom will resume gas deliveries and send at least 5 billion cubic meters of gas to Ukraine at a price of $385 per 1,000 cubic meters after it receives the first tranche of the $2 billion. Ukraine will also have the option to buy another 5 billion cubic meters by the end of March, depending on how the weather is, because I think this is the amount that they're short, and they need to make it through the winter here, so they have to purchase this gas. There's no way they're going to make it. The people will freeze if they do not pay for this, and it seems like they have no choice whatsoever. I know they put it off. They were in the summer. Everything was fine. They purchased coal down in South Africa, but now we're coming into the cold months, and it will be cold there, and they are going to need to heat the people's homes, because if they don't do this, they're going to see another revolution, and these people will overthrow the present government here, and it will not be a coup d'etat. It will be grassroots rise up to overthrow the government. Now it seems that the wall building is continuing in Ukraine. Kiev pledges to finish the first stage of engineer construction work within the wall project on the border with Russia by September 30th. Kiev has suspended operations of 16 out of 65 border checkpoints on the border with Russia. To ensure public security, the government will be suspending a flow of individuals crossing the state border between Ukraine and Russia through 16 out of the 65 checkpoints. The Ukraine government has already dispersed $100 million of their currency, or $7.7 million, for the implementation of the wall project. So I'm looking at this situation, and I'm seeing that they're cutting off Russia completely, where they have the southeastern region contained inside Ukraine. And it looks like they're trying to stop Russia from actually coming in at any point whatsoever. And this might be a setup to push a military operation inside Ukraine, and they're just waiting for the wall to be built, just waiting for all these checkpoints to be closed, and we're going to have to watch this very, very carefully as time goes on. Now, Russia is a little perplexed by Obama's UN speech about Russia. Obama cited the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, Russia's aggression in eastern Ukraine, and the threats of the Islamic State group in the Middle East as the greatest threats to the international order. The Kremlin is puzzled with the U.S. President Barack Obama's speech at the UN General Assembly earlier this week, ranking Russia second among the top international threats. Obama presented the the worldview of country that has spelt out its right to use force arbitrarily regardless of the UN Security Council's resolution or other international legal acts in its national defense doctrine. That's why the speech of peacemaker, the way it was conceived, failed to deliver if one compares it to the real facts. And of course, as you can see, Russia is on one side, which they negotiated peace in Syria back in 2013. Russia is on one side here, which they negotiated peace in Ukraine. You never hear the U.S. government, central bankers, or officials ever call for peace or dialogue or anything. You only hear war cries. That is all you have been hearing. But of course, Obama is out there, and he's trying to make everyone believe that he was the one who created peace in Syria, who created peace in Ukraine, which is completely the opposite. And I've always said this, whenever they say something, it is always the opposite. Now, it looks like, as we know, China and Iran have very good relations, and China and Iran are going to conduct joint naval exercises. And this is the first time in 4 decades a Chinese naval flotilla has visited the Islamic Republic of Iran. In a subsequent talks, the two navies leaders agreed to hold joint exercises in the Persian Gulf. The U.S. Fifth Fleet is based nearby in Bahrain, you have to remember. So we have Chinese naval ships there. We have Russia naval ships in Tartus in Syria, and now we have the Chinese naval ships right in Iran. The People's Liberation Army Navy flotilla includes the Chinese Navy vessel Changchun, which is a type of O-52C guided missile destroyer, and Changzhou, which is a guided missile frigate. So we can see right now China is moving into the area. We have Russia in the area, and we have the United States central bankers and other Arab nations bombing inside Syria at this point. So it looks like the UK Parliament has voted, and they are going into Iraq, and they will start bombing very, very quickly. Denmark is to dispatch 7 F-16 fighter jets to Iraq to aid in the struggle against the Islamic State. So we see more countries joining in the Iraq area. And of course, this is all in preparation for the occupation of Syria and to move in to get Assad eventually when this real war gets started in this area. Now, it looks like in Iraq what's been happening here is that the United States is supposedly, allegedly, bombing the Islamic State. But what we're starting to find out is that they've been bombing a lot of empty buildings in Syria. They've been hitting a lot of targets where the Islamic State doesn't even exist. And even in Iraq right now, we're seeing Iraq's battalions complain that the U.S. warplanes have intentionally bombarded the positions of the Iraq Army and the volunteer forces in northern Babil province for the second time in the last month on the pretext of targeting the Islamic State strongholds. The intentional bombing of the armed forces and popular forces shown wicked intentions of the U.S. and the international cover-up of this attempt on the pretext of fighting the Islamic State. Had the United States been honest in its claims, it would have targeted the Islamic State position in Jarf al-Sakar, Fallujah, and other regions identified by us instead of striking the army and popular forces. So what is the United States actually really doing here? They're not hitting their own proxy army. They're hitting other targets inside Iraq. And we said this once before. Of course, they use the Yazidis as, oh, we have to come in there for humanitarian purposes, and the Yazidis, we found out that they live on the mountain and there weren't any stranded there, and the whole thing was put into practice to bomb near Arbil, which was hundreds of miles away, and this is where the oil fields are, and they're protecting all of this, and the corporations, of course, they're there too. They're protecting all this from the actual people who are rising up there, the tribes, the people who are coming after the government of Iraq. And we can see that this is really starting to advance forward here. We have the same thing happening in Lebanon. It happened in Libya. It happened in Yemen. The entire Middle East is completely falling apart. Now, it seems in Iraq we have gotten some information, and this is coming from the Vice President of Saladin Provincial Council, Mohammed Hassan. He revealed that there are dozens of American military advisors at Speicher base, and that 13,000 additional American soldiers and their military vehicles will arrive in the next few days at the base. The American Military Command chose to station the personnel in Speicher base because it is the largest military base in Iraq, noting that there are dozens of American military advisors at the base that coordinate and supervise military battles. And we can see right now the division headquarters have been set up. We can see they're bringing in the troops into the area. And again, they continually tell us, if you ever notice on the corporate media, they tell us The government officials are continually telling us no boots on the ground, no boots on the ground, no boots in Syria, no boots in Iraq, and all we're seeing is mission creeps and boots on the ground. And it goes back to everything they say is always the opposite, because where are they actually going with the airstrikes? Think about it. They keep telling you this cannot be won just using airstrikes. So where are they actually going with this? Nowhere. And this is why boots on the ground are coming in. They cannot defeat Assad with just airstrikes. So they need the boots on the ground. They need the proxy army. They need the Free Syrian Army. They need additional troops there. This is all a setup. Now, the Pentagon is out there, and they're completely denying that they're killing any civilians. Their bombs, their missiles are so exact that no civilians are being killed whatsoever. Only the Islamic State. This is absolutely ridiculous. It's almost like the drone that they fire on the terrorists, which is just the everyday civilians. They've been telling us for a very long time that they haven't been hitting any type of civilians, and then all of a sudden it came out that, yes, they were killing many, many civilians with these explosions. They have no idea who they're hitting. Actually, they know there's civilians in there. They know there's other armed forces in there, and pretty much you can see that they're just denying it now, and eventually it's going to come out, yes, we hit a couple civilians, but this is what has to be done with war, and you'll see they'll turn around and completely tell you something completely different. Now, Qatar is out there, and they're saying that to fight the Islamic State, this will not succeed as long as Assad remains in power. U.S. and Arab forces have bombed the Islamic State targets in northern and eastern Syria this week. We have to counter terrorism, yes, but I believe that the main cause of all of this is from Assad. Now, they've been blaming this on him for quite a while, because you have to remember Syria is the springboard for terrorism, and they're continually doing this. And you know the real mission is to go after Assad. Now, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel and Joint Chiefs Staff Chairman General Martin Dempsey said the U.S.-led campaign against the group, also known as the Islamic State, is still in its infancy, but continues to garner support from the international community. Yeah, they're coming on slowly, but not to go into Syria. Right now, it's only a few nations that are in Iraq that are actually bombing. Mostly it's the United States, and we have token bombings from France, the UK right now, and Denmark. So they're saying that they're going to have to train about 15,000 fighters to take on the Islamic State. Well, no, they're going to need 15,000 fighters to take out Assad. There has to be a ground component to the campaign against the Islamic State, and this is coming from the Joint Chiefs Chairman, and he thought they only would need 5,000, but now it's up to 15,000, and you know this is going to include a lot more boots on the ground from the U.S. forces that are already being transferred over to Iraq. So all of this right now is being ginned up, prepared, created to take out Assad. And Secretary Hagel said that there has been no coordination, nor will there be, with Assad, suggesting the Pentagon will continue to launch strikes in Syria without the permission of the country's president. Nothing has changed about our position that has shifted our approach to Assad and his regime, because President Assad has lost all legitimacy to govern. So let's just think about this for a second. The United States central bankers are bombing the Islamic State in Syria, and they're going to remove the Islamic State. This is what they're trying to do. Then what are they going to do? Does this make sense? They're going to remove the terror threat in there, bring in more Free Syrian Army forces, and what did they accomplish? Well, they accomplish more funding for the Free Syrian Army, more training for the Free Syrian Army, to get who? Assad. And they're not killing the Islamic State, as we've seen in many different videos and many different reports, that they're hitting empty buildings because they're giving them advance notice. We also know the Free Syrian Army has a non-aggression pact with the Islamic State, because we know they're one and the same. So we can see this is all being done to take down Assad, because what is their goal in Syria? Just to remove the Islamic State? But we're seeing other things occur. A buildup of troops, more money, more military assets. No, this is a push to get Assad. Now, if we look at what has been going on, and it's all over the news, that they're hitting all these refineries. The mainstream media and the U.S. government are attempting to portray the strikes against the Syrian oil refineries as a strike against the Islamic State. The fact of the matter is that they are a strike against a secular government of Assad. Strikes against the refineries hurt Syria more than the Islamic State. A large portion of these areas the Syrian army was poised to retake control of. This is particularly the case in Deir el-Zor, where the Syrian army recently launched a major offensive against the death squads called the Islamic State fighters. And what has happened is, as the United States central bankers came in and bombed this area, the Syrian army could not retake the refineries, and now the refineries are destroyed because the Islamic State didn't build these refineries. Syria built them. So we can see right now that all of this is completely devastating the infrastructure in this area. Similar situations are found in the other locations mentioned as targets of the U.S. airstrikes, like in al-Hasaka, where the Syrian army had made significant gains alongside Kurdish forces. And of course, they destroyed the area, they bombed the area, and now the Syrian army cannot retake these areas. The same thing in Raqqa, Aleppo, and Deir el-Zor, where they have air bases. So all of this is being wiped out. The infrastructure is completely being destroyed, so the Syrian army cannot retake these areas whatsoever. And you have to remember, Assad was making huge gains in this area, and they were just about to retake many of these areas, and now they cannot. There's nothing there to retake. And you can see they're pushing the Islamic State west. They have the Islamic State moving back into Iraq for the safety region and to regroup and get more military assets and then move back into Syria. We see they're moving up into the north to close off that whole region where that borders Turkey. And all of this is being done to take out Assad. Now, Assad had to pretty much step up their bombing in the west because everything is moving in that direction. And right now, Assad has been using airstrikes in the west to push the Free Syrian Army and the Islamic State back in that direction, and they're continually making advances, pushing towards the west, because this is exactly what the United States wants to happen at this point. Now, as we know, there was a fire at the Chicago International Airport, and it seems like some of the corporate media is trying to link this to terrorism, to say, yes, this is part of terrorism, and it could be part of the Islamic State, and we'll have to see where they go with this. There's also another killing in a Oklahoma food plant where there was a beheading. A guy used a knife, and he was part of Islam, and the FBI is investigating this, and it looks like the worker was trying to convert other people into Islam, and they're trying to link this with terrorism and to the Islamic State, and they're trying to really fearmonger to make people think that this is going to be going on all over the place. And of course, just like the gun grab, I guess knives will be taken away from every single person because, someone was stabbed, beheaded, and knives cannot be had by any of the people in the U.S. They're very dangerous. Now, the FBI is out there, and they're not actually sure if Khorasan was really a threat to the United States. The Obama administration was describing that Khorasan, they were going to attack any minute. Now, of course, this is a completely made-up terrorist group. They don't even exist. And actually what they did was they hit a part of the Free Syrian Army in the strikes, and they called it Khorasan. They did it by accident. Just like in Iraq, they're bombing different regions. And we can see right now the FBI is out there, and they're flip-flopping around going, well, we don't know if it was really an imminent threat. We don't know if they were really coming. We're not really sure. Maybe it was a week, 6 months, 8 months out. We're not really sure about this whole thing. And they're just going and backpedaling on the whole entire thing. The Islamic State is out there, and they're telling everyone they're going to attack New York City soon. And again, we're getting warnings of the subway. We're getting warnings of Times Square. And The Islamic State terrorist group has said that the extremist Islamic group has planned an imminent attack on New York City and that the jihadist brothers are in process of finalizing their plans. Now, you have to remember, Obama did say that, these terror groups could use a nuke inside Manhattan. We also have to remember back in 2013 there was a chemical weapons drill in the subway system, and it's just very interesting how they mention subway in this whole entire thing. Now, since we're bombing the Islamic State, the FBI is out there saying that, because we're bombing here, we really need to expect an attack here on the homeland, which they like to call it, which reminds me of Nazi Germany. But they keep saying the word homeland, and they're saying, yes, there will be attacks occurring here in the United States. And of course, as we know, this will be a false flag type of an event here in the United States, and we can see they are definitely prepping for this. They're building the story over time, and this is why everyone really needs to get prepared. Make sure you have things in place, and you can see that this war is coming. It's just getting started at this point. This is the pre-show of what is really coming, and when things really start to fall apart, you need to have plans in place. You need to make sure, if you have children, make sure they understand that we need to go to a meeting place if things should go down. If anything happens, there's so many things going on in the world right now that we really need to get prepared, get ready for pretty much anything. We have Ebola in West Africa, which we don't know what they're going to use it for. Right now it's contained there, and they're using it to decimate the economies there. But again, they could use this to wreak havoc here in the United States, to bring people off into FEMA camps, declare medical martial law. So there are so many things going on. We have the threats of the Islamic State. We have the Russia, where they could cyber attack and destroy the financial system. Now, of course, all of this is fake. I mean, this is all made up. This is where they want us to believe it's coming, but we know it's from the inside because they understand the economy's falling apart. They understand that there's no way out of this. They need to blame this on another group or country to get themselves off the hook, and they don't care about the American people, the other people in the other countries. They really don't care about you. They will do whatever it takes to preserve themselves. If they have to destroy a city, they will do it. If they have to black out parts of the country, they will do it. If they have to bring down the financial system, they will do it. They will be fine. It's the people that they're trying to convince that we need to go to war. Send your brothers, send your sisters, send your children, send your cousins. It's a risk the central bankers are willing to take. They're willing to take that risk to send your family off to war because they don't care. They don't really see us on the same level. They see us as serfs. They see us as slaves to the system, and we can do whatever they want with us. I mean, look how they treat us. They create First Amendment cages, fenced-in areas. They tell us that they can search us at any time. They tell us that we do not have free speech at all. They will tell us what type of speech we can have, where we can have it, where we can take pictures. If we want to film wild animals in the public national parks, we will let you know if you can or can't. I mean, think about what they're doing here. And this is why we need to be self-sufficient. This is why we need to be prepared for what's going on, because we will have a chance to make a move to take back this country. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.